Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are going to talk about Han Blue Force, and this is going to be my in-depth deck tech about the deck. So this video is sponsored by Card Market, the best marketplace to buy and sell cards in Europe. So without further ado, let's get right into the list here. As you can see here, so this is a list that has been worked on. I have to give credit where credit is due. This is the original concept of Beton, who's been working on this list even before the ban of fourth throw. He was even made a second place at one of the PQs, so this is obviously taken from his original version. We then made some changes in order to improve the list, and I've made my own little changes to the list as well as been at playtesting as well. So this video is going to be about those changes, and it's going to be about how to play the deck in the current meta game, even though the meta is not real established yet. So one is the concept of playing Han2 Blue Force. Well, the concept is very simple. We are playing a mid-range deck that with a leader that allows us to basically cheat additional resources into play. So we have the Han Solo, the leader, that can use his ability to add additional resources into play that are temporary. And this ability is going to be allowing us to play ahead of curve. So there's typically two situation in which we're playing ahead of curve, usually on turn 1, in order to play 3 drops on turn 1. As you can see, we're only playing 6 2 drops, which is not enough to be able to consistently find a turn 1 play. But because we play so many 3 drops, we can play an Ezra on turn 1, a Falcon on turn 1, what's called an X-Wing on turn 1, a Yoda, and sometimes even Tech. And the idea is very much to play ahead of curve, sacrificing cards. And the second moment in the game where we're going to be using, most likely we're going to be using Han, even though of course we can use Hans at any point in the game, but the most usual one is going to be on turn 4. So we're going to have 5 resources. We're going to be adding a 6th resource into play using Han. Then we're going to be able to deploy Han. So even though Han is a leader that technically deploys on 6 resources, he kind of deploys on 5 because he can add himself an additional resource and then deploy. And then he's going to be attacking, adding himself a 7th resource, and then he's going to be playing and allowing you to play Enfysnet, Luke Skywalker, or Qui-Gon Jinn. And this way we can kind of double ramp into a 7th drop, which is really, really strong. It's one of the most powerful things you can do in this game. And you can do this by not having to spend any cards. You don't even have to ramp. It's just built in on your leader, which is extremely powerful. So it is not technically a ramp because it's not permanent, but it is nevertheless kind of a sort of a built-in ramp into the leader, which is just incredibly powerful. So specifically, why are we playing Han, the blue version of Han? Well, the reason is because, so historically speaking, in set 3 we had Han Yellow was the most popular version. Then we had the ban of DJ, which made Han1 Yellow a lot worse. And then we moved on to Han Green in set 4. And why are we now playing Han Blue? Well, there's multiple reasons for this. The first is because in set 5, blue cards are some of the most powerful cards, the most well-supported color in the set. If you look at the top 10 cards of the set, I would say at least half of them are blue. So the blue was by far the most supported color of set 5. So we got a lot of great new blue cards that we're actually using in this deck. And the second reason is Anakin Skywalker. There's actually a specific synergies. The fact that you can, between Anakin, where we can very easily put villainy cards in our discard pile, and then play Anakin Skywalker for 6. And I'm even going to go as far as saying that this deck is by far the deck that uses Anakin the best out of any other deck in the meta, even better than Chancellor Palpatine. So those are like really, really massive upgrades for the deck. And Han Blue was always kind of a deck that was kind of a thing. Being able to double ramp into Luke Skywalker has always been a very powerful play. But basically outside of the double ramp into Luke, it didn't really have much going on other than that. Now it has a lot more going on at all stages of the game, which makes it a much more valuable option. Is it going to be the best version of Han? If you want to know about this, there's actually a video by the Super Racers. The Super Racers actually compare the 4 different versions of Han and tell them, and basically tell you which one I think is the best. And I do agree with their conclusion, so I will put the link in the description below. But today we're going to be specifically focusing on Han Blue Force and what makes this deck powerful in the meta. So the other question you might wonder is, why was Han Blue Force absolutely completely absent from the meta in the first 3 months of the game? Well, the reason is because Fourth Throw was particularly powerful at countering Han1. The reason is because Han1 likes to sacrifice cards from his hand in order to play more expensive cards. So what's going to happen is you're going to be discarding your own cards from your hand, and you're going to be keeping the most expensive ones, and then your opponent is just going to Fourth Throw you, discarding a very expensive card and killing your own unit. And it is really, really difficult to play around this if you're playing Han1. Basically, the only way to play around this is just simply to not use the Han's ability and to always kind of keep a cheap card in hand, which we don't play many of them because, once again, we like to play ahead of curve. And even if we do this, it kind of defeats the purpose of playing Han in the first place. So basically, Han was pretty much unplayable because over 40% of the meta was made out of Fourth Throw decks. But now that Fourth Throw is gone, Han1 can fully express itself and being able to play the game the way it's supposed he wants to, which means aggressively using Han's ability in order to play ahead of curve and get ahead of your opponent that way. So the other question you might wonder for yourself is, why are we playing the blue force base over the 30 HP base? Because you can see we're not really playing that many force cards. We're playing 3 copies of Shiroots and 2 copies of Itinerant Warriors, and then a couple of 2 copies of the Daughter in sideboard. So why are we playing so few force enablers? That doesn't seem to be worth it, right? So we actually made a little comparison between Fourth Throw versus non-forced and kind of compare what you're getting from non-force and what you're getting from force, and the reason why we found that force is actually better. So if you're going for force, you're gonna get Shiroot, and Shiroot is a big deal for this matchup because basically Han loves to have Sentinel units because he loves to have ways to protect his leader. When the leader comes out, one of the worst things that can happen to your leader, you put an energy conversion lab and just one-shot it, or just even like ambush it with anything else. And by having by being able to play the turn before a 4-drop Sentinels really reduces by a lot the chances of your guy being ambushed and killed. So really being able to play a Shiroot the turn before is really a big deal at protecting your leaders and preventing from being intercepted. One of the things that we fear the most whenever we're playing Han is that we are fearing Han being so you're going to be playing an extra resource to get up to 6, you're going to deploy Han, and then this is where you are vulnerable. If your opponent shuts you down, then you can't play a 7-drop, and it's kind of a disaster. The blue version has 2 major advantages. The first version is like it can play Shiroot, that is great protection to protect Han, and it also can play Anakin, which is a great plan B. If your Han gets intercepted, you still have the option to play Anakin as a backup plan, which is honestly a really great backup plan. So Shiroot is a really big deal for the deck. It's also a great card against Sabine, which is, as you know, is probably going to be one of the strongest deck in the game now that in the upcoming meta. So this is the main reason. The second reason is Itinerant Warrior is also a very solid card. Also a good one is Jedi Lightsaber. If you're playing the non-force version, you're not going to have as many force units to put Jedi Lightsabers on, so even though you can play Jedi Lightsaber in a non-force deck, it works better in a force deck because you're going to have more force unit mechanically. So Jedi Lightsabers and Itinerant Warriors are very solid cards that you're really happy to have in this deck. Jedi Lightsaber, there's simply just a lot of decks that just can't deal with it, and having just 2 copies of it, opening up with a force unit and turn 2 Jedi Lightsabers in some matchup can really win you the game. And Itinerant Warrior is just a very solid card. Unit that is hard to kill, has immediate impact on the games, and heals you up is just a really solid card. So this is like the second reason. And the third reason is the Daughter in the sideboard. This one is more of a niche reason, but the Daughter in sideboard happens to be one of the most powerful anti-aggro card, at least aggro decks that do not try to interact with you and play the kind of swarm space decks, and there's quite a few of those decks, and the Daughter really hard counter them very well, so that's another reason to play the Force. So what is the advantage of playing non-force? Well, if you're playing non-force, the advantage is obviously playing a base that has 2 extra HP, which is always great. The second thing that really you get from non-force is that you get to play L337 instead of Secretive Sage, and L337 is just strictly better than Sage because it can actually free unit from capture, which is rare but can occur, and it also a small gold unit, which Han loves to have. But other than this, there's really not much going on. Other than those 2 things, really the main advantage is, so basically kind of like the thought process is that, yes, you're losing 2 HP, but then you are getting them back with Itinerant Warrior and Shirut because those cards are so insane against aggro. So overall, I feel like just the Force just gives you more, even though it is not using the Force the same way the old Han2 Blue was doing, or the Anakin decks, or all those other decks. It's not intensively using the Force like Talzin, or it just has Force as a sort of a side dish, but it turns out that Force is actually just better than running non-Force, at least from what I've been testing. So the first 2-drop is Secretive Sage. So Secretive Sage is nothing truly special in this deck. It's just a really solid 2-drop that can equip a Jedi's lightsaber, and is going to be difficult to deal with. It's actually good against the Pink plus Tarkin Town, and it actually is going to give you the Force early on in the game. It's nothing more than this. There's going to be a lot of situations where you're going to be wanting to ramp turn 1 to play a turn 2, a 3-drop on turn 2, but that's not, it depends really on the matchup. There's going to be matchup where you're going to prefer to just simply play a 2-drop and keep your card for doing something else. Next we got Yaddle, which is here for the exact same reason as Secret Sage. It gives you a cheap 2-drops you can play on turn 1 that's going to give you the Force, and I can equip a Jedi's lightsaber on it. And without having to use a Han's ability. And that's just a really solid card, and one a great addition of the new set. Now we're jumping directly into the 3-drop, as I said. The deck can either play by playing a 2-drop on turn 1, or you can just simply use Han's ability and play a 3-drop on turn 1. And you can do this with Ezra Bridger, which is going to be a 3/5 on turn 1, which is just really, really powerful to play something that beefy early on in the game, especially against people who like to open with a 3/3 for 2 on turn 1. So Ezra Bridger is really good for this, and it also, once again, is another turn 1 play that gives you the Force. It's a hugely overstudied unit that you can play on turn 1, and that's going to give you the Force. Then we got Tech. Tech is not a card that you necessarily want to play on turn 2. Actually, you want to avoid playing this on turn 2. It's amazing in this deck because we know that Han is a deck that spends a lot of cards and runs out of card very easily. So it needs to have some sort of card that you can smuggle, that you can play whenever you're out of card. There's going to be a situation where there's 2 cards that you have in hand. You have to resource, obviously, to get into your leader deploy. And then there's other expensive card that you want to keep because you want to double ramp into 7. And the deck basically gives you things to play whenever you want to keep your cards for something else, which is really good for a deck like this that is really restricted in cards most of the time. It's also just a really solid card against control in general. Then we got Yoda. Yoda is another great card for the deck. You can play it on turn 1. It's going to be, of course, great against those aggro decks that are trying to race you in space, so we can actually basically deal damage and heal our base at the same time. It's also a card that will draw us a card when it dies, which is perfect for the deck. It's a great recipient of Jiz's lightsaber whenever we play this on turn 1. So it's not overstat. If we need stat, we prefer to play Ezra on turn 1. If we prefer to have a unit that can restore, and a card that will draw us a card when it dies, so really good against hard control, we'll prefer to play Yoda instead. So these are really great options to have at the early stages of the game, and Joy's card is really valuable in this deck. Next, in space, we got 2 3-drops that we like to play. The first one is the Millennium Falcon. So Millennium Falcon is particularly powerful in Han1 because if you didn't know, the defeating of resource from Han's ability happens after you paid for the Millennium Falcon tax. So you can play for the Falcon and then defeat the temporary resource that you got from Han. And this way, you basically avoid playing the Falcon tax. So if you play a Falcon on turn 1, you're not going to have to pay his tax for the turn after, which is great. So this allows us to have very, very aggressive openings against certain decks that can be really, really useful to kind of put on the aggression with the Falcon. It's also a great defensive card in space. Whenever your opponent's open space, your opponent Falcon, and you kill that turn 1 play, you almost win the game on that, which is just incredible. It's also a great finisher whenever you manage to put your opponent very close to death and you're playing the Falcon to kind of put extra pressure on them. It's a great card against control. It's a great card against aggro space, and it's the absolute most auto-include in any Han1 deck, at least for the time being. Another space unit that I like to use in Han1 Blue, which the Swoop Racers, for example, Beton did not put in his original version, and is the Red Squadron X-Wing. Personally, I find this card to be absolutely fantastic in this deck. It does, it gives you, the problem is that Han1 is going to be very vulnerable in space because we're mostly playing on the ground, once again being a force deck. So having more redundancy in space, more stuff that we can play on turn 1 to interact in space is great. Ray Squadron can be played as early as turn 1, and the flexibility of being able to play it as a 3-2 that draws you a card or a 3-4 is just excellent. The fact that it's a card that draws you a card is fantastic in Han1, and it gives us now 2 really good cards. It basically multiplied by 2 the amount of great openings we can have against the space decks on top of Falcon, which is great. Of course, not as good as Falcon because it can't attack right away, but it draws us a card, which is fantastic. So I just find this card to be absolutely amazing every time I happen to draw it. It's good against everything. It's just generally just a powerful card. And if you playing, I think if you're playing Han1, blue, you must be playing this card in my opinion. So the argument against this card basically is like it's not a force unit that gives you the force, but something you have to understand about this Han1 blue is like it's not super over dependent on the force the same way the old force decks used to be before 4-throw ban. So this is not a 4-throw centric deck. It's not a force centric deck. Like there's a couple of strong force cards in there that needs the force, and having the force obviously an advantage, but we don't desperately need it every stage of the game. So we can totally afford to play on turn 1 something that is not force, because on turn 2 we're going to be playing something with the force anyway, and we'll be able to get a force whenever we need to anyway. So it's just a card that happened to be working really well with the deck, and drawing cards with Han1 is always great. Then we got the Jedi's Lightsaber, which are pretty much our turn 2 play into our, we can play it on Ezra, Yaddle, or Yona very efficiently, and against certain type of decks, people just don't have ways to deal against it. If you're playing against that doesn't have a way to deal with it, it can just win you games out of nowhere. So we play 2 copies of it, just a really cool card that sometimes can steal games. And the thing is, like, because it's the only upgrade that we're running in the entire deck, it's not really super worth it for the opponent to have anti-upgrades just for that card, because it's only just a 2-of in the deck. So if your opponent just basically, it baits your opponent into putting a bunch of anti-upgrades in their deck, and they end up just never seeing Jedi's Lightsaber, it kind of is another great thing about it too. 4 drops, the main reason why we're playing the Force is obviously Chirrut. Chirrut is probably one of the best Sentinel in the game, and it is a Sentinel that will protect your Han's deployment, which is super important. It will be a great card against aggro in general. Obviously, it's pretty much just a 3/7, and if you're able to get a force, then it can be even better than a 3/7, which is just absolutely insane. And we have enough force to enable him and to make sure that we do get the force by the time we get to play Chirrut. And of course, the fact that we get to play it 1 turn earlier can sometimes be extremely clutch. And we can play it 1 turn earlier without having to sacrifice his HP, as opposed to Han2, which is so good against aggro. Another great card is Eternal Warrior, just a very solid 4/4/4 shielded that heals us once it comes into play. Even if you don't have the force, you just want to play a 4/4 shielded, it's just a really okay card in general. So just a really solid card that we're happy to play as a 2-of. Another card that is another great way to protect Han's deployment is Kira, that plays as a 2-of. Depending on the meta, you could be argued that you should be playing 3 of them. I'm still unsure what is the correct breakdown for 4 drops. But Kira basically is kind of like the Chirrut, but it protects you against removal rather than protects you against ambush. I mean, she does protect you against ambush too, but not in the same way. She's a great card, and she's a great way to prepare your on deployment, make sure that your on is going to be able to deploy without any problem. So that's really, really a great card for this. Into the 6 drop, we obviously play Anakin Skywalker. So why is Anakin so good in this deck? Well, Anakin is incredible in this deck because, first of all, thanks to Han's ability, can be played 1 turn earlier, that we know that how powerful that can be, but also because we can enable the -6/-6 very, very well, because we happen to be playing 3 copies of Power Darkseid and 1 copy of No Glory Only Results. And the idea is that we're going to be resourcing those cards using Han's ability, and then Han's ability, we're going to be defeating those resources with Han's ability and then putting them in the discard pile. And this way, this allows us to put black card in our discard pile without having to play them, without having to pay the aspect penalty. So that's really, really what makes Anakin so good in this deck, because it's so easy to enable his -6/-6, because it's so easy to put a bunch of cards in the discard with this deck. So with this deck, yeah. So it's incredible because it's very often going to be -6/-6. Coming to play, of course, 5/7s, great stats. Another great thing about Anakin as well is the fact that one of the things they're the most afraid of whenever you're playing Han is like having your Han deployment being interrupted by someone just killing your Han or exhausting your Han, and then being stuck on 6 resources, which most likely doesn't do much in the game. But because we play Anakin, we actually have a great backup plan. We got something really, really powerful to play on 6 whenever our Hans gets dealt with. Moving on, we got Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan is kind of similar to Han. Is like it gives you something to Anakin in the sense that it gives you something great to play whenever we are trying to play Anakin. We're stuck on 6 resources. Another thing you can also do is just simply play Obi-Wan first, then deploy your Han Solo in order to protect him. Obi-Wan can be a little bit awkward sometimes. That basically the problem with Han is like it's not a deck that plays very wide. It's a deck that usually will have only 1 or 2 units in play. So it's sometimes hard to give experience to another units, and that can be awkward sometimes. But it's still a card that situationally can be very powerful. That's why we play it as a one-of. Then into as a 7-drop. So 7-drop is a key moment for the deck, because this is the moment where you are going to be able to double ramp. So we'll be able to play our 7-drops effectively 2 turns earlier than a regular deck, basically. And obviously this color combination is some of the most powerful 7-drop in the game. So one of the 7-drop we play is obviously Luke Skywalker, which is the best 7-drop in the game now. I think it's clear for everybody. A card that obviously has insane amount of stats, huge amount of restore, that gives you a great inevitability as well as a very powerful when played ability. We also play a toolbox of other 7-drops. We're playing Enfys Nest, which is a great way to a card that some people have forgotten about, but I think it's a very powerful card. The advantage of Enfys Nest is the flexibility. It can be dealing with both the ground and space, and the fact that it kind of has this recursive ability. It's not only when she comes to play, every time she attacks. And we also play 3 copies of DR44 blasters to upgrade our attack up to 7, which allows us to bounce cards that have 6 or less power, which is just insane. We can really get some huge tempo swing on this. So Enfys Nest is great. We have this as a one-of. And then also as a one-of, we also have Qui-Gon Jinn. So some people might be surprised that we are playing Qui-Gon Jinn over the Han Solo Reluctant Hero. And the reason why we're playing Qui-Gon Jinn is because Reluctant Hero is really great at killing stuff that have 6 health or less. But the thing is, we're already playing 3 copies of Luke Skywalker and 3 copies of Anakin Skywalker, which often is going to have the -6/-6 enables. That means we have already loads of ways to deal with units that have 6 HP or less. We want to be able to kill something that are a little bit bigger than that. And Qui-Gon Jinn does this really well because it ambush with 7 attack, and obviously the when defeated can sometimes be a massive blowout when we can deal with 2 units at once. So it's really, really great for that. So this is also a one-of, it's kind of a toolbox card. Depending on the meta, we might be transitioning to play 2 Enfys Nest or play 2 copies of Qui-Gon Jinn, depending on the meta. This is really much a meta call. The meta right now is not very well established, so we're still going to have to tweak the list depending on the meta, but I'm just giving you like a different option that are available to you as far as 7-drop is concerned. But basically, we're playing 1 of each of those 7-drops. As far as non-unit card, we're playing 1 copy of Shin Flurry. So Shin Flurry is a little bit awkward because it's a card that does card disadvantage, and cards that do card advantage are very annoying to play whenever you play Han, because they are because Han is very restricted in cards. So it's very difficult to play card like super cheap card like this in a Han deck most of the time. But Shin Fury is nevertheless a card that, if you have it at the right moment, is incredible. It combines extremely well with Luke Skywalker and Anakin. So we play this as a one-off, just as a kind of a random card that can sometimes blow up the opponent up. It's also a great option to have from whenever you have resources and then you play tech. You can actually play this in super late game situation from basically just as a timely intervention. From your resource pile. It's also an option that can be available to you. Other than this, we're playing Power Dark Side, so obviously in order to feed our Anakin to enable the -6/-6, we want to have those kind of very powerful cards that are enabled by Han, the fact that you have to destroy your own resource. So we have to think about what are the best villainy card that we could play out of Aspect, and in this department the best one by far is Power Dark Side. Paradoxide, even if you're playing for 5 resource, is actually a very powerful card. Because your opponent does not, if you're playing heroism, you're not, your opponent does not expect you to play Paradoxide, so he's not going to be playing around it, and Paradoxide is not played around, it's just nasty. It basically becomes like a Rival's Fall for 5, which is just incredible. And the thing is, your opponent might know the deck list and might play around it, but in this case, he's playing around a card. Just the fact that this card has an impact on the game and your opponent is actually playing around it, even though it just might be in your resource, that's already having a psychological impact on your opponent. Just for that reason alone, Paradoxide is by far the best out of aspect card, because you don't even need to play it in order for your opponent to respect it. And there's just nothing else bad you can say about this card. It's just really, really powerful. Then we also play 2 copies of Felder Dragon. One of the main advantage of course, playing blue over the green version is that we do have access to those hard removal decks, which are very handy because Han can sometimes really go into a late game with a value engine. But without the answers to expensive card, you just might just lose the game. So we play 2 copies of Felder Dragons and 1 copy of Rival's Fall for that package. Rival's Fall is kind of a good card in the current meta because it will one-shot those pilot leaders, which do see quite a bit of play, notably Boba for Data Vault. Then finally we play a 5th, basically a villainy card, and here in this case is No Glory, Only Results, which is a very flexible removal. Like, my thought process about this card is, so some people play other villainy card in his slot, and honestly you can play any other villainy card. It kind of like, it doesn't really matter. It's just to give us a little bit more, it's just to enable the -6/-6 of Anakin a bit more consistently. And in this case, I've decided to choose No Glory, Early Result because I think it is the card that you're not going to be playing often, but when you do play it, it's going to save your life. Like, like let's say a very heavily upgraded a Chewbacca or an upgraded like TIE Phantoms, that kind of thing that only No Glory, Only Result can be played, will save your life. Or even playing a No Glory, Only Result against a Krayt Dragon, something like this. It just gives us this kind of like Joker card that can just get out of jail card. Even though it is very expensive, you can't put a price over just not losing the game. And even for 7, it is well worth playing, in my opinion, in those kind of situations. So, and once again, it's just an extra villainy card. And as far as I've tested a wide variety of different options, and as far as the different options I've tried, in my opinion, No Glory was the best one. Is the one that I've actually used the most often, actually won me games to have access to this card. So now we're going to get into the sideboard plan. So obviously the meta is not established yet, so take what I say with a grain of salt as far as the sideboard is concerned, but that's going to be a good way for us to introduce why are the different cards I'm playing in sideboard and why am I playing them. So we're going to start off with the fact that you can find Qui-Gon Jinn for 4.5 euro on card market. So Qui-Gon Jinn is a card that was really overhyped in preview, included by myself. Turns out that the card was just a little bit too narrow and there's a lot of competition, but I still think it's a great card to pick up, especially since after rotation I expected this card to go up in price quite a bit. So pick up your Qui-Gon Jinn if you haven't. So first matchup I want to talk about is the Space Aggro matchup. So the Space Aggro matchup is this is currently our sideboard plan against Space Aggro. As we can see, we are very well prepared for the matchup. We're going to be taking out our Sentinels or ambush cards that are not going to work against a space-based strategy. We're going to have Bamboozle to beat the space leaders. The Rival's Fall, which is another way to beat space leaders, and then the Daughter, which is great against non-interactive aggro decks, where you play this card, and basically it's kind of like every time you get the Falls, gain 2 HP. It's a bit more complicated than this. Sometimes it's better than sometimes it's worse, but that's the idea. Every time you get the Falls, you kind of heal 2, which is very powerful if you happen to have a lot of Force units in play, which is not difficult against Space Aggro because they usually don't defeat your unit. So then you have a bunch of Force units in play, and you get the Force over and over again, and then you can use the Daughter over and over again and just heal yourself a lot. And the fact that we can play the Daughter 1 turn earlier is also very, very beneficial. Against Sabine, as you can see, we're keeping the Bamboozle to deal with the Sabine Dark Sabers. We are keeping the Daughter because it's just healing. We're removing the tech which are too slow and Rival's Fall that are too slow. And we're of course keeping all of our Ambush and all of our Shiroots, which Shiroots is basically the best card in the deck in this matchup. Against Boba 4 is where we have the most sideboard cards. Actually, we got a lot of. It's a matchup that can be really tricky because we don't have a lot of board presence, so indirect damage is very very powerful against us. So it's a matchup that can be a little bit tricky. So we have the Daughter to protect ourselves, even though it doesn't protect against indirect damage. It's still like an extra ways to protect to kind of keep your base alive. Grogu is by far the best card we can have in the matchup. Putting the indirect damage on Grogu and then healing him up is just game-breaking games when you open up the game against Grogu. So Grogu is not a card, is a card that is very niche in our deck because it's really only truly amazing against Boba 4. It's kind of bad against everything else. But in my view, Boba 4 is going to be one of the most played deck in the current meta, and having a card in your sideboard that can swing this matchup so heavily is very beneficial. And of course, you can put a lightsaber on it. It gives you the Force, so it's not bad either way. But it just is, in my opinion, a card that will swing the Boba 4 matchup so hard that it's very much worth playing. And the fact that we can play on turn 1 makes it very strong. Then we got Bamboozle Rival's Fall against, of course, the Boba leader. We're removing, once again, the Ambush card. The Sentinel cards are not very useful in this matchup. A couple of Secretive Say, which is not a great card in this matchup. So we can take this out. And with Grogu, we're going to have more turn 1 plays anyway, so we can afford to take off a couple of turn 2 plays. Then against Cad Bane. Cad Bane is another matchup where Grogu is very strong as it absorbs those damage from the Cad Bane's ability and then heal up stuff, so that's really really strong against Cad Bane. Rival's Fall because it's good against 6 deploy leader, and then we remove the Yaddles and the Yodas, all the cards that are very vulnerable from Ping plus Talking Town. Against Heart Control, I don't have a lot of sideboard against Heart Control because I consider this to be a pretty good matchup for Han. With the amount of, we play a ton of Smuggle because the blasters and the tech. We have a lot of extra speed thanks to the Han's ability. So I feel like Han1s in general in the history of Star Wars Unlimited have always done well against Heart Control. I also don't expect Heart Control to be a super big force to be reckoned with. I know that the Swoop Racers are running the Tranquility loop in the main deck, but to me, as much as I like Tranquility in this deck, I still think it's just a little bit too slow for the meta, unless you're playing it against Hard Control or Soft Control. So one makes Tranquility very strong. So why people might be wondering why Tranquility in this deck? Well, Tranquility is basically an infinite loop. If you get Tranquility, you grab a Tranquility from your discard pile, your Tranquility dies, you can play it, and you have an infinite like loop of 7/6 to put on the board. That is just really oppressive. We also play quite a few Republic cards in the deck. Our most important card, Anakin, is Republic. We also have the Yaddle, which is also Republic. We also have Qui-Gon Jinn, which is Republic. So it can basically always grab something whenever you play the first one and then you play the second one. It just loop itself. So it's really, really good against those grindy matchups. We remove the Shroot, which is not really good against Control, and the Ambush, which is not really good either. Against Ramp Control, pretty much the same idea. It's just that we're going to be keeping the Shin Fury and instead taking out another copy of Shirut. Shirut is not great against Ramp Control because there's so many removals, Barrage, Barrage, Takedown, Power Dark Side. All those cards makes it so the tankiness of Shirut basically is kind of irrelevant. So we just rather have this grandiose card and more removal basically for the expensive card of our opponent. In the mirror match, Han1, we're just having more answers to our opponent's Han1. Han1 is going to be so much more popular in this new meta, so we need to be prepared for the mirror match, whether it's Han Green or Han Yellow or Han Blue. And in this case, we're going to be even a Han Red. So we got Bamboozle, which is great at stopping Han1. It's also great against those pilots because Han Green likes to play a lot of pilots. With the Han pilot, but also Chewbacca, so Bamboozle an answer for that. Rival's Fall is also a great answer to Han deployment, if you can ramp into it as well. If you get to play first, you can ramp first. Your opponent then deploy, and you take it down. Then we remove the Secretive Sage because it's not a bad card in this deck, but it's just not pretty much Secretive Sage is kind of the card that if I don't know what to remove is kind of what I'm removing. It's because it's not essential for the deck. It does help to consistency early on, but it's not essential for the deck. Other considerations for sideboard. So we're gonna go over the different cards that I've seen from other versions that I've seen. Deepa Bilaba in the 6-drop as another 6-drop that you can play in case your hand gets answered. As much as I like her, I just think that she's not doing anything particularly important that the deck needs. Once again, if we want to deal with 5 HP unit or less, ignoring shield, we already have Luke Skywalker and Anakin to do that. So I feel like she's a little bit redundant. And she's also quite specialized as she only ambush on the ground. I would rather play cards that can do cross arena. So she's not a bad card, but I just don't feel like it's the best thing to play. I feel like without the ping of Quinlan, she loses a lot of her punch. Because she only has 5 attack for 6 cost card. As another out of aspect card you can run is Bazine Nitol. That can be useful because even if you do pay the aspect penalty, be able to basically Bazine her to remove like a super laser blast can just win you the game. Currently I'm feeling like in a control matchup I would rather, once again I'm gearing my version more to beat mid-range and cheesy kind of space deck instead of trying to beat control, because I feel like the deck is already kind of pretty good against control, so I would rather play no glory only result in my personal version. Then we got Entrench. So Entrench is usually played by people who are not running the Red Squadron X-Wing because they basically have no other space than just Falcon. My version does play Red Squadron X-Wing, so I do play enough space that I feel like Entrench can be a very awkward card, so I don't run it. Spark of Rebellion is another good anti-control card that you should consider. I'm basically waiting for the meta to be a little bit more established to see if I need Spark of Rebellion or not. And once again, I feel like the deck is doing pretty well against control without those tools, so that's why I'm not including it, but it's another option. Village Protector is another card that I like against aggro to have more Sentinels. But basically right now with the 3, I'm playing the full package of Shirut, so I don't feel like I need Village Protector. And there's still some decks that basically hard counter Village Protector, which can be really awkward. So there's still some situation where she feels very bad. So that's why I'm not including her. And then finally, Takedown is also kind of a flexible removal, which I think is a really solid card in this deck. But once again, I'm waiting to see how the meta is going to shape up before kind of establishing if I'm going to need this card or not. This is the end of this video. Thank you so much for following it. If you got any questions about the archetypes, feel free to ask me or to ask it in the Enigma Discord, because in this case you will not only have me answering it, you also going to have other players in the team like Beton who are also expert in this specific archetypes, so you can get their opinion and you can get my opinion. You can, between those two things, we agree on most things, but sometimes we disagree on a few things, so it's always great to have multiple perspective. And yeah, I hope this video was useful. I think this deck is going to be a strong force to be reckoned with in the upcoming meta. So it is, even if you don't plan on playing it, I think it's useful to know about it, so you can counter it better. Thank you so much for following that video, and I'll see you next time.